thank you very much for the invitation and to be with you here. It's always a pleasure for me to land in Dublin and to come to this green island, for which indeed I have a special relationship. So my pleasure, of course, to be able to speak to you about, I think, one of the most important topics of the European Union at the moment, which is energy and climate change. And I'm more coming from the energy side because climate change, as you know, is dealt with by DG Environment. And it's good to have some competition maybe between DG Energy and Transport and DG Environment, while some things that they should go together. And there were plans to demerge, by the way, Transport and Energy at the end of this year. We have not seen that yet, but so I'm still in Transport and Energy. I don't know where I will be in February, but that will depend on the next commission, which is, of course, as you know, also something to be decided in the coming week, I think. And we begin to see the shape of the future, particularly with the Lisbon Treaty. Lisbon Treaty now will become a reality. And maybe because we were not sure that it would come into force, we have not looked at all the provisions of the treaty, and now we are doing that in the field of energy, particularly where I think that I may say immediately that there are two things which are very important. First of all is Article 193, which is the provision on energy, which is gathering everything of the energy. So the four main issues there are listed. That is the energy mix, which has to be sustainable, and the security of supply, the interconnections, the internal market, and the development of renewables and energy efficiency. All this in a spirit of solidarity, which is also a new word which has been introduced and which I will try to develop in my presentation because I think it may play a very important role in what we will do in the coming years. The second element in the Lisbon Treaty is the new Vice President for External Relations, who is also the High Representative of the Council. So having somebody embodying the powers of the Council and the European Commission is probably a big chance for the EU to be able to speak with one voice in its external relations, and in the field of energy it would be particularly important. So I have here a presentation which is giving you also a bit what has been done during the last years. And we'll see how it works, yeah. I will speak about what has been done in the last 3-4 years since Hampton Court in October 2005. That was under the British presidency and Prime Minister Blair, where surprisingly, I have to say, it was said that a common energy policy would be useful and should be developed. Coming from UK, it's something which has to be underlined for sure. And since then, we have had an acceleration of all the events in the field of energy, because in March 2006 we had the Green Paper on secure, competitive and sustainable energy. In January 2007 we had the first strategic energy review, which was endorsed in March 2007, and that was meaning 2020 by 2020 and the internal market package. And then we had the second strategic energy review, more focused on the energy security or security of supply in November 2008. And so in 3 years' time, the whole picture in the field of energy has changed. And maybe say that it's through the climate imperative, because clearly everybody is aware that we have there a major challenge to address. And the famous 2-degree Celsius differential between pre-industrial temperatures and the temperature at the end of this century is the key element of our policy. I think that no need to say what it means if we are going beyond the 2 degrees we may see really major catastrophes due to water, due to change of ecosystems, in the food chain, in the coastal situation and health situation. So it's a kind of horror which had led, I think, the chief scientist of UK, Mr. Stern, to say that it's better to address the issue now and to spend 1 or 2% of our GDP than to wait for the 20% GDP damage that all this could cause. But this is not given for granted. I gave a presentation last week to 350 generals and colonels from various armies, I think 70 armies of the world. And I got a question, don't you think that you may be wrong by working on this assumption and that you are creating another damage by trying to create a low-carbon economy and asking us to change our economy? So let me think that ExxonMobil 2 years ago was saying there is plenty of fossil fuel and there is no problem with that, and it's not the greenhouse gas emissions are not due to the man, by human sources. So I think that this debate is over. 3 years ago, it was not. When we came with the first strategic energy review, it was not. I have to say, in 3 years' time, there is a huge difference in the mind or the approach on this. And even with the 2 degrees, we have only 50% chance to stay below that. Even taking huge actions against greenhouse gas emissions here, you see clearly that we need, well, the peak will be 2015, and that means to go there, so to reduce our emissions, means you have the famous scenario of 450 ppm, which is close to the 2020 of the EU, and the 450 is the one of the International Energy Agency. You reach only this, and probably is not enough. So that is, of course, the key challenge. Business as usual, I think that's clearly something that everybody has understood is not sustainable. So we see there, if we continue as we do today, we have a huge increase of oil, coal, gas, and very limited development of biomass and other renewables. And nuclear stays around what it is. So nuclear is not making a big difference. So we know where the problems are coming from. Energy is the cause of 60%, 65% of the greenhouse gas emissions, partly from power production, from the transport industry and buildings. And there is non-energy emissions coming especially from agriculture and land use, which is, I know, particularly a problem for Ireland, because Ireland, I think, has a higher level of emissions from this. So if the ratio is 2/3, 1/3 there, I think that for Ireland it may be a bit different. Here is a poll we did with our Eurobarometer, where there is a very strong push for measures to be agreed at EU level. So I think the population in the EU is very much behind EU measures to tackle these problems. Maybe you see that the new member states are less convinced than the older one. I don't know where Ireland is. There, in the middle. Yes, just in the average of EU 25. So, but it's 64%. So 2/3 of the people in Ireland are surely clearly behind EU measures. So here, what are the measures we have now on our table? After the first strategic energy review, we have had this endorsement of the 20% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions compared to 1990. And so that led to the Energy and Climate Package to be adopted in December 2008 with legally binding targets and also a system of emission trading with the aim to create a carbon market which would work properly, and which would also be the main incentive to invest in low carbon technologies. Well, we have had a huge debate there on the carbon leakage. You know, that is those sectors most exposed to international competition, who would like, of course, to have free allowances to be able to continue to compete on the international markets. This work is being done at the moment. The sectors have been identified and so on. But it shows how difficult it is. If you look in the US at the moment on the debate between the Senate and the House of Representatives, and also on the cap and trading, there are always the need to, or the discussion about who will be exempted from the discipline and so on. And so you see that there is a huge activity behind that, and the Commission is, of course, in the center of that, because we have a huge work at the moment on the definition of the sectors and who will get free allowance, who will not, and so on. So, and everybody would like, of course, to have free allowance. That is the difficulty. Then in renewable, we have also a directive which is now in force, saying, well, 20% at EU level. Well, again, 20% greenhouse gas emissions is EU level, so there is a breakdown per country, and each country has different targets according to its own situation. The same for renewable, because I know Ireland has 40%, so you have a target which is double the EU target. But it is a contribution to the 20% target at EU level. And this target is binding. And we expect now the national plans to be submitted by June by the member states to show how they will reach their target by 2020. We have also the 10% biofuel target, which is a flat target for all the member states. It's the same. And it's biofuels, it's more correct to say renewables in transport. And that may be important also for Ireland. If you have a target of 10% of electric vehicle by 2020, if these electric vehicles are powered by renewable energy, like wind, offshore or onshore, that will count in the 10% target. The other debate is still going on the biofuels for the certificate on sustainability. We are developing this at the moment. And then the 20% energy saving is not a binding target. It's an objective. It is, of course, today debate in the Parliament, particularly, who would like to see this target becoming binding. I don't know what the Commission will do with that, whether it will follow the very strong appeal of the Parliament to make this target binding. But it's also a very difficult target to make binding, because you need to see how you organize that and how you measure it, because the energy saving is in all the sectors, in transport, in appliances, in industry, in power generation and things like that. So that is very difficult. But the 20% there is saving 20% of energy in 2020 in comparison with the business as usual we would see in 2020. So this target, this objective of 20% is not always very easy to understand. Now, what it means, what this diagram means here is that if we are successful with the 2020, we may have an impact on the whole thing. And so you see that if we are implementing our policy, we may see a reduction of oil, we may see a reduction of gas, we may see a reduction of solids, that is coal, and an increase of renewables, and probably, well, stabilization or even a bit less on there, depending on what we have done with the German nuclear power plants at the time. But of course, you see also a huge impact of the price of oil. So if you have a barrel at 100 or at 61, it makes also a certain difference. So we could say that an oil barrel at a high price is a very good incentive for the 2020. And what we have seen last year in July with $147 a barrel, I think should lead us to think twice about what will be the price of oil once the economic recovery will be there. You have seen it went down to 30, and now it's again around 80. Nobody can predict the price of oil, and this is maybe the biggest uncertainty in the whole process. But probably the insurance against this volatility of oil price, which has also an impact on gas price, is that we are saving energy and that we are trying to develop alternative fuels. That's quite clear. Now, we have had a lot of debate, and this is also a geopolitical issue, and I flag that here because the Russians, of course, when they have seen this diagram, they have said, well, we do not invest anymore in our gas fields. Why should we? Because if we continue like today, we will import much more than today. The difference between this scenario, which is our energy policy and a high price, and the scenario of moderate price and baseline is about 150 BCM. 150 BCM is about 1/3 of our consumption, or 30% of our today consumption. So that is a huge difference. So what is the message we are sending there to our suppliers, be they the Russians or the Norwegians or the Algerians or the Qataris? This is, of course, an important issue. We tell them that we think that in any case, because of the decline of our gas production, which is quite serious in the next decade, we will in any case import more than today. So that is where we have clearly a message which is positive to them, and I think in the field of oil it's about the same. Now we think that climate protection and energy security are going together. We will still have a lot of fossil fuel in 2020. Even if we are successful with the 2020, we will still have a predominance of fossil fuel in our energy mix, and today it's 80%, and we may still see 75% in 2020. So you see that there is a huge inertia in the energy system, which means that you need to take decision very early to have an impact at the end. What is also very important for all this policy is the well-functioning internal energy market. There we have had the third internal market package for electricity and gas, which has been adopted recently, which has now to be implemented. We think this is a very important tool for developing the 2020 policy. Just to give an example, there is in this package provisions on smart meterings, which should be installed by 2020 everywhere, and that would be, of course, a major help to energy saving. We see also, and on the basis of the gas diagram I showed you, it's very important to have a strong dialogue with our suppliers. And it's important that we have an EU common message vis-à-vis Russia, for instance, or vis-à-vis Qatar, or vis-à-vis Algeria. That's very important. Here I would like to address a bit more the energy security aspect, or security of supply. So I come to the second strategic energy review. And I give you here the demonstration of a number of interesting issues. After the January 2009 crisis, that is the cut of gas coming from Russia through Ukraine to the EU. And so the 7th January, we had a full cut of 20% of the gas supply of the whole EU. That is 80% of the Russian gas. Russian gas was continuing to flow through Belarus and Poland, but was stopped completely to Ukraine. And what we have seen, is very interesting there, is that, for instance, we have had an immediate reaction here from the interconnector between UK and the continent, where normally the flows are going like that, and the 7th of January the flows were coming like that, because there was a need of gas here, and then the gas was flowing on the other side. And we have had these countries without gas, and we've seen that the pipelines were not going that way. They were only going east to west, and it was very important to ensure west to east flows, which has been done with the between Czech Republic and Slovakia, also between Greece and Bulgaria. But at the very late moment, so that was at the end of the crisis, because on the 20th January the gas came back. But all these lessons were very important, because they have shown that the EU internal market is the best guarantee for security of supply. So if you consider that all the gas which is here, and there was plenty of gas in January, there was enough gas in the whole EU, but the problem was to bring this gas where it was needed. And you may see that we have still a problem between Spain and France at the moment, because Spain had a lot of gas, but it was not possible to bring it there because there is no interconnection between Spain and France. So they are working on this at the moment. And there were a lot of missing links here also and, in this area. So we have seen that the internal market would be the best response, but we need also to promote infrastructure to ensure that this internal market may work properly. So that's the lessons which have been taken, and we had already anticipated the situation in our second strategic energy review in November 2008. So January 2009, thank you, our Russian friends, they have given us the full demonstration of all what we said in November. And that means we have to work on this plan, which is covering infrastructures, crisis prevention and response mechanisms, energy efficiency is coming back, of course, indigenous resources, technology also, and again, external relations, with the internal market as backbone for all this. So infrastructures, as we have seen in January, particularly in the field of gas, it's really essential to have well interconnected member states. And we have energy islands. Ireland could see itself as an energy island, but I may quote others. I was meeting the 3 Baltic states yesterday. They are an energy island. They are even not connected to the rest of the EU. In gas, for instance, no connection to Finland, no connection to, only connection to Russia, where they were belonging before, or Soviet Union. But you have also Spain and Portugal. They are very badly connected to France. You may look even Bulgaria and Romania. They are not connected. They have a pipe which is crossing their border, but it's a transit pipe, so they cannot use it for their own consumption. So this is really something we have to work very fast. And the European dimension is obvious. And if you take electricity, it's exactly the same. We have the same shortcomings. We have also that in the middle of Central Europe as a result of the enlargement of May 2004, that all the countries on the east side were belonging to the Russian system, and the west, well, was more integrated in electricity. But today there is a huge challenge, and the missing interconnections are today even more obvious when you are trying to integrate renewables into the system. And if you think about offshore wind and all these questions, or solar in the southern Mediterranean, you see that interconnections will become essential. So we are working on this, and that is where we have also tried to take a number of areas where we think should be used as a laboratory for developing first a regional approach before we have the full European dimension. That's why we have developed the Baltic Interconnection Plan with all the countries surrounding the Baltic Sea. The Southern Gas Corridor, which is linking the Caspian Sea reserves in gas to the EU through then Azerbaijan, Georgia and Turkey to the EU, and that is where we have a pipeline like Nabucco, and that's where we have also ITGI, White Stream. There are plenty of pipelines, including the Russian-sponsored South Stream. And we have liquefied natural gas, which is in the field of gas essential to ensure flexibility, because that's gas through ships. We have the Mediterranean Energy Ring, which is a bit like the Baltic, but with an additional dimension, which is the external dimension, because we have to deal with the northern African countries and the Middle East, with all the political problems you may see there. But as you know, there is a lot of renewables in northern Africa, and the Moroccans, for instance, are very interested to send wind energy to the EU. Or the famous Desertec project of the Germans, developing the solar concentrated solar power in Sahara, and to bring the electricity to the EU. So all this is behind that. North-south interconnections, the map I have just shown on the January crisis, has shown also that there is no link between the Adriatic Sea and the Baltic Sea. So going from Trieste, for instance, to north of Poland or Lithuania would be an essential backbone also for the Eastern Europe. And North Sea offshore grid is very important, and I think very important also for Ireland, where we have at the moment also a kind of laboratory to look at how we may develop offshore wind in the whole area. And we have a European coordinator who is trying to bring all the people together on this, regulators, TSOs, ministries, and so on, to see how we may develop that. So at the end, of course, if you wish to push all this, and I think there is no time to lose, the funding issue, of course, is an important issue to address. In principle, energy interconnections are supported by or self-financing, because there is a tariff which is agreed by the regulators, and the consumer is paying for the transport cost. But sometimes there is a lack of incentive for those who have to invest, and that is where an EU funding could be useful, especially when the benefits of an infrastructure could be disseminated through a number of beneficiaries across the EU. So you may not just limit the thing to a territory of a country. So there is a multi-country approach needed there, and that is where EU may help to foster these investments. Baltic Interconnection Plan, just to show you today in the gas field, in the gas sector, all the projects which exist there. I may tell you, for instance, there is an LNG dream in each of these countries. And it's clear that optimizing the investments there means that all these countries have to speak together and to see where it is the most appropriate to have an LNG terminal, which would give them some flexibility vis-à-vis their single supplier, which is Russia at the moment. But there are too many projects there, and we need to bring all these countries together to see what is making sense. Again, it is a work we are doing with the regulators, with the TSOs, and with the ministries. So this is very important to have these three together to address these issues. I may tell you, 1 year ago we were nowhere there. At the moment there is a true willingness really to go through and to have solutions. In electricity we went through and we have a clear roadmap, but in gas it's a bit more difficult because the big brother is just next door. So another aspect which is very important and which is a hot topic in the gas sector as a result of the January crisis, which could be another November crisis. I don't know. I have not seen whether the Ukrainians have paid their bill today. But yesterday they are not yet paid, and the 7th of each month is the deadline for the Ukrainians to pay their bill to Gazprom. And we have a gas coordination group Tuesday afternoon. My commissioner asked yesterday to convoke it. And so we have to be ready to address a gas disruption. And we think that's a work to be done with the 27 member states. This is really something which belongs to us. It's not a matter which is depending on the Russians or the Algerians or anybody. It's just for us to be prepared in case of disruption. And the disruption may come from a political problem or commercial dispute or from technical disruption and so on. Can be from Norway, can be from Algeria. At the moment it's from Russia, Ukraine, but okay. So there we want to say the internal gas market has to work as long as possible to serve all the customers. And we need to ensure that this market may respond. And it's also important that each member state has an emergency plan in case cuts have to be made to a number of customers, and to know in which order you will cut your customers is very important. What is also clear that you have to deal with this also with the community involvement, because it's not anymore one member state which is hit by a disruption. Automatically it is spreading around because of the interconnections, even where they do not exist. But we have seen in January 12 member states were hit, so that you need really to have a coordination between the member states. So what we want now with the draft regulation we've tabled in July is to have a risk assessment made by all the member states, first individually, but then probably on a regional basis, to develop a preventive action plan and emergency plans, which should probably not be national plans, but should be also regional plans. And I think in Ireland there is a good case to have a joint emergency plan with UK. In my view, first all islands, and then with United Kingdom. But there are other areas where plenty of other places in Europe where such regional approach would make sense, such as the three Baltic states, or Spain and Portugal, or Bulgaria, Greece, Romania, and so on. So this is quite revolutionary. When we speak about solidarity in the Lisbon Treaty, that is where solidarity will be expressed. Because if you are doing your risk assessment, you are looking how you are affected by a disruption, you will see automatically all the connections you have with your neighbors. And you will see also that your neighbor, if it is taking some measures in the case of the same disruption, that it will affect you. So automatically you will have to put your heads together. And that is essential. So we are working on this at the moment very hard. In the Council, in the Parliament, we have quite good debate. And I hope we will come with something which is really demonstrating the EU added value. So there. The support from Eurobarometer, so from the citizens of Europe on this, it's very interesting. The question was whether the affected member state by a disruption should be able to rely on the reserves of other EU member states. Everybody is saying 70% at least. Yes. So you don't, of course, transform that into saying, well, you may live on the reserves of the neighbors. If you wish to build the solidarity, you need to create all the elements in advance to do that. And we had, for instance, in Germany and Poland, a big row about this, where Germany was saying, well, we are well equipped, but we will not be there to help our neighbors. So the neighbors have to help themselves first. And I think it's correct. And so that is where we need really to work together and to see how this can be done properly. Energy efficiency, I think I said enough. If there is a silver bullet in the present energy situation, it is saving energy. That is really where today, at the price of energy you may see, I think oil and gas will continue to go up. Electricity, because it is produced also from gas, and renewables these days is not cheap. It's very important to save as much as energy as you can. But it is to be done everywhere. And it is also depending on technologies, but it is something which has to be done at all levels. There is a huge element of subsidiarity there, but also international cooperation is important. I believe that we have been able in 3 years' time to come to the partnership on international cooperation on energy efficiency and to convince Russia or China and India to be in, because they have the same problems. We are all facing the same problems. Be it the scarcity of fossil fuels for tomorrow, or be it the climate change. So things there are also very clear. Technology, we just present a new paper on the strategic energy technology and the financing of low carbon technologies, where we say we should add €5 billion a year during the next 10 years, that is 50 billion euro more in research in the low carbon technology. So this is, of course, quite important. You know what is the new technologies. Here you have nuclear fusion, which is very remote. But there are a lot of things which are maturing fast, and biofuels, for instance, is interesting. We are already at the third generation. I think 2 years ago we were speaking about the first generation. So I think that there is a huge incentive at the moment to invest in new technologies. And then finally, external energy relations are probably the domain where we have been less successful up to now. We'll see whether in Copenhagen will be able to show our leadership. No, I don't like the word leadership of the EU. I think the Chinese have understood now that they have also an interest to be much more proactive. And they seem to be more proactive than they were 1 year ago. And I think that the risk for EU and US, for instance, is to be overtaken there by a country like China. So we need, of course, to have a global cooperation. As we say, we are all in the same boat, be it on climate, be it on energy efficiency, be it on fossil fuel exploitation, low carbon economy, and so on. So there will be a competition on the low carbon economy. That's quite clear. Energy interdependence. 3 years ago, we were speaking about security of supply. And when we were dialoguing with the Russians or even Saudi Arabia, they were saying, well, where is our security of demand? We invest in our oil fields or gas fields. It's hundreds of billions of dollars, so you need to ensure that we will have a market for that. Otherwise, we keep it in the ground. So this issue has led us to grow a lot in our dialogue towards energy interdependence, which means that we have to work also with these countries on all the issues, energy efficiency, renewables. Just I give you an example. We had an energy working group with the Gulf Cooperation Council. So that means Saudi Arabia, all the small states like Qatar and so on. And 3 years ago, they were saying, you are crazy with your renewables and biofuels, so you are killing us, you want to get rid of oil. And this year, they say, we want to work with you on renewables, we want to work with you on energy efficiency. This is a huge change in attitude. So there is a global consensus at the moment on what has to be done. And I think it's good news that there is really this movement towards a common understanding and the need to work towards common solutions. So we have, of course, also, the G20 is becoming very important. We've seen Pittsburgh how important energy has been considered there. And that's also good news. If the G20 is able really to define common principles, that means China, India, Russia, Brazil, all these countries which are the emerging economies are coming in. It's very important. Inside the EU, what we do is really to develop our principles much more in depth with our neighbors. We have, of course, the European Economic Area with Iceland. Well, Iceland is now asking to come in the club, but Norway is not doing yet that. There's still too much gas and oil, I think. I think the Norwegian ambassador is in the room, so sorry for doing that, but just... energy community, important. The Treaty on Energy Community is something we have developed to try to bring together the former Yugoslavian countries, which were all going apart and creating new barriers. And the Energy Community Treaty has been concluded between the European Union and the southeastern European countries there to try to create the same principles of our internal market. Now we are extending the energy community to Moldova, Ukraine and Turkey. There was an agreement recently with Moldova and Ukraine. This may be also very important for energy security, that these countries are applying the same principles as we do. Neighborhood policy is embarking also all the Northern African countries and so on. Eastern Partnership is also dealing with Azerbaijan and Georgia and beyond. So this is important. So we are extending our zone of influence, which is also extending our regulatory framework to these countries. And I think it's an important thing. I read an article in Financial Times how the EU was exporting its regulations outside. And I think there is something true, and all these mechanisms are a way to do that. But we still need the single voice or the single message. If you take the pipeline diplomacy these days, we are not yet there. And you see how Russia is developing South Stream with bilateral deals with our member states like Greece, Bulgaria, Romania, and Hungary, Austria, and so on. This is quite unsatisfactory, especially if you think that Russia is prohibiting all member states to speak to each other. That's part of the clause they have in their negotiations. So this is not acceptable. This is not compatible with the EU internal market, and I suspect also, we suspect, the Russians who try to impose clauses which are not in line with the internal market rules. And I think that this will finish somewhere in the court, I guess, one day. But it is exactly the same situation we had 10 years ago in the aviation sector, where in the aviation sector, everybody was making nice deals and selling the internal market of the EU to its own benefit to a third country, without having, of course, any advantage for the EU. And this is something which has to change, and this is just the application of the rule that the more you integrate your internal market in the EU, and the more you are acting in a unified way with third countries. So we are coming to this point. I think we have developed in the last 3 years all the main elements of this internal policy, and we will come now to this external dimension, and there the Lisbon Treaty may play a very important role, particularly with the new institution that we have, an external affairs minister for the European Union as such. That may change things in the coming months. So finally, well, I spoke about 2020, but we are now looking at 2050, and we are starting work on what should be done for 2050. What is, I think the target there is 80% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, means really fossil fuels are not there unless they are clean. So that means a lot of developments, a lot of change in infrastructure, a lot of development of technologies, and what may be, of course, a major trigger is Copenhagen. You know that if there is an agreement in Copenhagen, or 20% commitment becomes 30% as up. So that means huge change. So if there is an agreement in Copenhagen, which is not sure at all, but maybe next year there will be something, we will have to change our present policy to go faster. So it's very important that we are starting to work on this. And for the new Commission, it will be a major challenge to be able, by the end of 2010, to say what should be the road to 2050. So that is on this perspective that I would like to stop here and to be at your disposal for questions. And I thank you very much for your attention.